Hello, my traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies. I have been so sick for the past month and a half, and I'm really still getting over some of it. I've just had congestion that's lasted a really long time. My energy's been low, and while I have kept up with my short form content, I took a break from long form, but we are back today, and we are talking about GOTH by Otsuichi. This is a light novel, a dark horror mystery light novel, which I absolutely loved. I tore through this in a couple of days. If you are a quick read and you like this book's vibes and atmosphere, you can get through it in a day. I really did not want to leave it. I did like it that much, so I prolonged my experience. Something that I love about light novels is that while they are typically very readable, they're not doing anything like wild with the prose, they go hard with the atmosphere. Every time I read a book by a Japanese author, one of my favorites is Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, I'm always just completely entranced. Like, I'm looking at the writing and I'm just like, this is so simple. The writing is so simple, but it is doing so much with attitude, atmosphere, and personality. And I am always sitting there like, how are they doing this? I believe one of my biggest flaws as a writer is that I do not trust the audience that way. I'm like, no, we gotta give it all the details, all the description. I am a whore for gorgeous tactile visuals. I don't think I'm horrible, but I know when I go back and read, I'm like, I really wanted to get the point across too hard here. If you are looking for something atmospheric, horror driven, without it being too much, don't get me wrong, there is gore in this. It's just, I wasn't nauseated. If you are squeamish, you might have some problems with some of the scenes in this book. One of the things that affected me most in the stories, I believe it happened in the story Voice. It wasn't a gore moment. There's a device that Otsuichi uses in Voice. The killer in that story kills this girl's sister, and he records her talking kind of before and during this process, goes to find the sister and is kind of giving her these tapes so she can listen to them. And then there's a point in that story where they run into each other, or he comes and tracks her down and they're in a cafe having a conversation, and he's just very frankly kind of confessing what he's done to the sister. And for me, I'm just like, that's fucked up. It's really not splatter heavy, but when it's there, it goes hard. If it bothers you, kind of Japanese schoolgirls being a lot of the victims of this stuff, then yeah, you might find that a bit fetishizing. Something else interesting that I really appreciated in this book was how psychic powers are depicted. And I find that this is very accurate because if you don't know, I also make woo content. And I am that, yes, psychic, ESP, all of that is real, but it is often, at least in American literature and cinema, not really depicted the weird way it tends to manifest. And I felt like GOTH had a really good handle on this, because somebody's psychic power will be like, oh yeah, this person just tends to always come upon dead bodies. That's their psychic ability. And that is that kind of weird stuff. It's not always having precognitive abilities. It is not always, speaking to the dead or being able to interact with spirits. A lot of the time, people's psychic stuff will be you always have a quarter when you need it. You always tend to find red pens in the woods. A certain type of bird will always come and land in front of you because it has a string for you. That is how some of this stuff manifests, and that's how it is talked about in GOTH. It's a quirkier and actually more mundane representation of what it is like to live with a psychic ability, because it's not usually something that anybody else is celebrating. It's not usually anything that's gonna astound another person or is going to be profitable for you. It's just weird, and you have to live with it and deal with it and just understand it about yourself. I also really enjoyed the light little weird romance that was going on in this book. And it is not a full romance. I will not give spoilers as to why it is not a full romance, but the dynamics between the hero or anti-hero and anti-heroine in this book, I thought was extremely sweet and extremely tender, because the way I was viewing it, it's like there's this girl who's had a lot of trauma in her life, and because of that, she's very fixated on the morbid, and kind of her psychic ability is she's always attracting a specific sort of situation. And spoiler, hello back there, a specific type of being. But that, like, I didn't catch on to that until the end. And the hero of the story is typically coming to her rescue. And he, the way I was perceiving him, was he was someone who was dealing with like very, very severe autism or very, very severe neurodivergency, but he's able to mask it very well. But his internal monologue, so like he's like popular, but his internal monologue is, this is exhausting, I hate it, I don't really feel this way or think this way about any of these people, but this girl sees me. So like together, because she's like ostracized, even though she's very, very beautiful, she's just got a weird vibe about her. So people tend to avoid her, or she avoids them, because they're just not gonna get her, right? But when the two of them come together, they're able to be fully themselves. He doesn't have to mask around her, and she can be her whole weird little self, and it doesn't faze him at all. And I love that kind of a dynamic in a romance. And it never goes, what I love about this especially is none of them is ever acting out of character. Like, we're not getting anything cliched, or this is just for the sake of the romance. The dynamics and chemistry between them, for me, just works really well. And even the ending of this, even though it is bittersweet, I think is very appropriate. Please do not pick this up thinking you are going to get a happily ever after. You are not, but it is not a downer. This is by no means something that's gonna leave you in a bad mood. My absolute favorite story in this is called Memory/Twins. I thought that was the most well structured. I thought like the foreshadowing in it was really good. Like I had a good idea of what was about to go down, but I was on the edge of my seat for it. I was really impressed with how that was paced, the reveals, the emotions on that one hit me. I was like, oh wow. It's upsetting, but in like a really good way. It revealed something about Moreno that I did not expect, but I loved it. If you are someone who is upset by graphic dog death, not for you, or at least one story, like I would recommend you pick it up, skip the story dog. Spoilers is that this particular story, a lot of it is written from the point of view of a specific dog. It is this girl's pet dog who is narrating this story. And what's going on in the story is that, like, I'm about to talk about dog death, okay? What's going on in this story is there are these dogs being killed in the neighborhood, so people are on edge. And what is actually happening is this girl and her dog are finding dogs to take to this place under a bridge, and she makes her dog fight these other dogs to the death. Why? Because at home, she is being very horrifically abused by her mother's boyfriend. And look, he's gotta die, okay? And she can't do it because she's too small, so she's training her dog to kill on command. That's what's going on. And what is so awful about this story, this was my least favorite story, mostly because like it isn't structured very well. You're getting this dog deal with his own feelings about having to do this, hating that he's having to do this, but also very much wanting to protect this girl that he loves. Like I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. What I will tell you, spoiler about that story, the dog in question who is performing the killings gets out. That dog actually has a happy ending. The girl gets out, the dog gets out. That dude does freaking die. Like, don't get it twisted, he died. But the dog is okay and actually goes on to live with a family that loves him. My biggest criticism of this book is that since the format is a mystery, our hero is typically the viewpoint character. Sometimes he's not, and he'll be a side character and then come in later, but he is always performing the same function. He's kind of like our strange Sherlock Holmes in that he is solving the mystery of what's going on, and then usually there's a scene where he is confronting the killer or the perpetrator or whomever and giving them this monologue. He's like, well, I found you by doing this, so I knew you were gonna do this, and then this, and then this. And I found that really annoying because it's just someone sitting there monologuing essentially about how intelligent and logical they are. And it happens pretty much every story. I could have done without it, but it's just the format of the story, and really it's my main complaint. And if that is the only complaint, whatever. I don't know if this is a criticism or not. Like, depends on how you feel. I thought this was something I was gonna have in my con category. And then when I read the author's notes, I was like, oh, all right, I'm just, in La La Land. So every story pretty much has a killer in it. We're finding out something about a killer or somebody doing terrible things they shouldn't be doing. And when this person is described, usually attention is called to a fact that they have soulless eyes, that you can tell they're evil by looking in their eyes. They're given very monstrous qualities, and it is discussed frequently how they have no souls, or that you can tell that they're evil just by looking at them. And for me, I was just like, since I was looking at the main character through a lens of neurodivergency, and when we're talking about someone who is a serial killer, I mean, we're talking about very serious mental health issues. So when a lot of monstrous qualities are attributed to that person, I tend to get a bit I get it, but at the same time, most of what you hear about a serial killer is about how no one could tell, they were normal. I get it as a narrative device, but as a service to the community, no. I had a problem with that. I typically have problems with the way mental illness is used in horror novels specifically. Sometimes it's done really well, but sometimes a lot of that is done to really cheap effect, and I don't really care for it. But at the same time, I'm not going to condemn every book that uses an asylum or mental illness as a horror trope. So all of that was going to be a con for me. But then I reached the end of the book, and an exchange happens between the main boy character and Marino, and I was just like, something supernatural just happened here, and it's changed my perspective on their entire dynamic, but I don't really understand what just went on. But obviously this is something that is not regular. And then when I went on to read the author's notes, he was just like, every single killer, including the main boy character in this, because this has very the killer's killer or Dexter's vibes going on. He can find all of these people because he's on their level. If he wasn't a different person, he would be the killer. And in fact, the reason why he's typically seeking these people out isn't really to do justice. It is to kind of extract Marino from these situations, but it's also because he's just flat out interested in them. He's intrigued. He's like, look, I just kind of want to find this out about you and ask you some questions, and it's up to you what you want to do. So he's not so much an avenging angel as he is just sort of pursuing his own interests. And his own interests are Marino and these characters that she gets herself involved with. And he even mentions that when talking about being in love with her or being infatuated with her, he even discusses that as, no, that's not what this is. It is more along the lines of obsession. And so when I read the author's notes, he was just like, every single killer in this book isn't a person, including the main boy character. They're all yokai. I did not realize that. They are literally not human. This is a complete fantasy setting. And so with that context, I was like, oh, the reason why they're being described as monstrous and inhuman and all of this is because they're literally inhuman. Probably we could have a critical discussion about serial killers being equated with yokai, but like, I'm not the one and I kind of don't care. It was a good book and I'm not getting into it. So yeah, for me, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10. One of my new favorites, and something that is most definitely an inspiration to me and the type of writing I would like to do in the future if I can complete a project. And I would definitely recommend, if anything about what I've said about this book has drawn you in, pick it up, go read it. You likely will not be disappointed. I would rec this, like, you could either do this as like a thunderstormy summer read, or look, we're in fall. This is also like a really nice September, mid-October kind of a book as well. So most definitely go get this, check it out, and let me know what you think. If you thought it was as good as I thought it was, or you know, if you totally hated it. And also if you know of other books like this, because I'll be looking at the recs that are in the back of this. But if you read Goth, or you know that I like this type of book and you have other books that you know that are like it, tell me. I will read them. I will go pick them up. I loved this.